Good morning and welcome. My name is James Hacon. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Mapal Group, and absolutely delighted to welcome you to our latest webinar, which is about the hospitality onboarding and retention. And of course, there really is no greater challenge in our industry right now. I'm really delighted to be joined by my colleague Harry Bennett, and Harry joins having worked here in the business for a very long time and works with a number of customers in his role as a senior account manager globally. So we're going to talk a little bit today about the whole idea of what we're seeing from the industry and within our quite significant customer base to really try and share some of the best practice and also share what we are seeing based on a lot of research from our content team over the past few months, where they've been really looking at some of the best industry players and also people outside of industry and how you can really move the onboarding process into being something that really encourages people to view your business in a very different way from the beginning and therefore encourage them to stay. But before jumping any further, we're going to share our screen. So, we're going to do very short introductions. So many of you will know me. My name is James Hacon, and as well as being Chief Marketing Officer here, I'm involved in a number of other things across the sector. I've been an executive, a consultant, and speak quite regularly around hospitality as a subject, and really delighted to be able to share some of that experience here today. Some of the brands are on the screen are just some of the brands I've worked with as a consultant, executive, and so on. And we'll move over to Harry.
Hi, morning everybody. I'm Harry Bennett. I'm a global account manager here at Mapal. I've been working in the hospitality industry since I was about 19 years old. Guess you could say I was born into it. My dad owned bars and restaurants in Edinburgh, so hospitality has been very much part of my life. And I've worked for several different companies, run a lot of bars and restaurants within Edinburgh, some of which I was onboarded excellently and had a great experience. Others, I was handed a set of keys and kind of told to get on with it, which isn't uncommon, sadly. So, yeah, we're going to talk to you today about some of the hints and tips that we have and our experience and how we can really onboard people properly.
I see that we've already had our first few comments, some from our team, so morning everybody, and also then from David Kellum, who I know is involved in recruitment, saying that the most important part of the process is the onboarding piece, which I think we completely agree with, David. But if you are there, so just to let you know that if you're on LinkedIn or YouTube, depending on where you're watching it, you can sign in and view it from that location. And once you're signed in, you can comment. So we'd really love to be able to hear from you and this feel like an engaging process. So please do, first of all, drop in there, who are you, where are you from? And then as we move through it, both myself and Harry will be both posing some questions. And if you've got any questions whatsoever yourself, feel free to drop them in. If you've got some additional views, great examples, things that you're doing, we really want to hear from you. So we've just had a few people log in there. So Gemma from Planet Organic, hi Gemma. David Hawksworth is always very supportive. So feel free to carry on dropping in from there. So thank you. So we'll pass back over to Harry.
Great. So I think to kick it off, then I think this is a really good statement. It's never been harder to recruit and retain hospitality team members. And you know, where do we think that the challenges from that lie from? I mean, one of the main ones is obviously the global pandemic that we've just been through. We've lost a lot of skilled staff to other industries there, which is no secret. When our business is closed, when a lot of the venues closed down, then people went elsewhere for jobs, and it's been very difficult to get a lot of those people back again. Also, we lost a lot of students who went back home. So that's a big part of the hospitality workforce. And then, dare I say it, Brexit potentially has an impact on it as well, with, you know, things like restrictions on foreign people being able to work within the UK and things like that. So lots of different reasons for it. But I think the real point here is you know, training and upskilling members of your team is really what it's all about. And that's where we want to be to get back open again. Now, what's the answer? James, I'll let you move to the next slide. The answer is that there is no answer. We don't have a magic wand. So we just thought this was quite an apt slide, given the fact that I'm from Edinburgh, the birthplace of Harry Potter, and my name's Harry as well. But yeah, the answer is really that there is no magic wand. And really, the real answer is it's down to retaining your staff in the industry, and by creating really engaging onboarding programs and trying to create a positive culture within the business to get people, to keep people there.
That's great. Thank you, Harry. So I think that we're going to talk about three distinct things today. So the first one is minimizing the challenge, which might sound really simplified, but I do think that we're hearing a lot from some really some of our most motivated and engaged customers, is that they're really looking at the kind of broader picture of the employment landscape, but also their business landscape, to understand what they can actually do to minimize the reasons that people might want to leave, and also maximize effectiveness of the team that are there. We're then going to look at lowering the employment barriers. So we do know that one of the things we hear really regularly is that actually there's delays within the recruitment process, processes that are too burdensome. These things are all creating an issue, which means that ultimately you're not quick enough to the mark to be able to get some of the best team members, and they will head off elsewhere. And the third one is how to make yourself a better employer fundamentally. But there are lots and lots of people joining, and thankfully lots of people talking and introducing themselves. So we've got Emma from Livelihood here, Katie from Sodexo Live, Morven from Noops, Natasha joining from Dubai, Catherine from Harvey Nichols L&D team, Cheryl from Malmaison and Hotel de Van and Frasers, and Alison from the Macri on Isla. Oh, and Catherine from the Lensbury. So feel free to carry on adding in there. And as I say, just make sure that you're really engaged and let us know what you think, and if there's anything else that you think we're missing, or examples that you think are even better than the ones we're sharing. So we'll move straight on to minimizing the challenge. And what do we mean by that? Because it does seem a slightly odd thing to be saying. But I do think that often, from an L&D and from a people perspective, we start at the end. So we start at this almost the point that we have a operation, and we have no involvement in the operation necessarily, and therefore we have to try and resource an operation from that point. And I think one of the things that we're seeing more and more is that really clever companies, the ones that are doing most effectively right now, are seeing it as a whole of company challenge. Whole of company challenge, that the reality is that it's hard to recruit, and therefore we need to look at this in a much more creative way. So the first thing that we're seeing people doing is think about smaller but mightier teams, and I guess that's always the dream. But we do know that that means that often you do have to really work hard to retain great people, because longevity and having some degree of experience within that venue will, of course, make somebody stronger. And I think an example for me, actually, a personal example, is that when I was in my mid-20s, I managed an island hotel, a resort, in the South Island of New Zealand. And within this destination, we had about 20 to 25 people on shift at any one time, front of house in the restaurant, on average. It was quite a big operation, but it really struck me that that there was a lot of extra bodies, because often it didn't really feel like it was that everyone was that confident or necessarily competent or skilled at what they were doing. And one night we had quite a significant issue, and I really leveraged and used all of my management team from the hotel and managed the restaurant on a full night with about 9 relatively senior people and 2 or 3 more junior people. And actually, it was one of the smoothest services I've ever known. And I think we've all got those experiences, right? When you've got an absolutely ace team, it really does deliver, and people often deliver really effectively. So I think we are seeing this, looking at how we minimize team numbers, but then it does potentially allow to be able to pay people more, because you are having less people on the floor at any one time. The second one, we've seen this extensively through the industry press, it's about reducing operating hours. And I think that, of course, for a lot of people, when we're trying to optimize and maximize our revenue potential, particularly out of a fixed cost venue, it's almost the worst thing that we can think of. But again, personal experience, I'm involved in a takeaway business in the north of England. We've got 3 sites. We've just completed this, closed Monday and Tuesdays, because it therefore let us breathe a little bit more. It meant our GMs were less stressed at this exact point, and it also meant that we could deal with more sickness and having a smaller team and the challenges around recruitment. And I do think that maybe not for the long term, but for the midterm, readdressing the structural hours that your business operates is something to consider. I think linked to that is reducing complexity. In almost any business I've worked with as a consultant, particularly when you get into kitchens, there'll be 1 or 2 dishes that will take a substantial amount of time to be able to produce and to be able to prep for compared to others. And one of the things I would recommend you doing if you're in a position to be able to make those changes is to think about the broader proposition, think about your menu structure, it might be the cocktail selection that you're on offer, and think about what it is that can be done to try and reduce some complexity, reduce the time, so that it really just streamlines your whole business. The next one here is about minimizing distraction in administration. I'm sure that you've all tried to do this for a long time. I think for the past decade of my career, I've spent a lot of time trying to almost reduce paperwork entirely at site level. And I've spent periods of time working in organizations where people work the whole of Monday. The whole management team on site are working on paperwork and admin. And of course, that's a lot of hours going into things that aren't necessarily that productive. And I also think that it's very easy to get into that culture, which is about sitting behind a laptop rather than being out with your team and guests. And I think there's something linked to being front and center with your teams on the floor that really drives a really positive leadership situation. So I think definitely have a look at that distraction and the administration. Look at how you can minimize that without being too salesy. That is, of course, where a lot of our tools come into play at Mapal Group, and I know that a number of you use the solutions already. But I think that and the last one, of course, linked to this, if you're looking to try and improve the working environment, the last one is about removing unattractive tasks. And there are things that I think that we all know that, frankly, when we were in operations, when we were a KP or a waiter or whatever it was within an operation, there were things that we didn't like to do. And let's face it, that probably hasn't changed. But the question is there things that you can do to reduce or remove those unattractive tasks, the ones that means that people don't want to come? Another prime example of that is we were speaking to a customer just last week. They used to have 3 a.m. opening hours, so they open until 3 a.m. They carved that back to midnight. And although that is a change in terms of their structure, it meant that they found it far easier to recruit for their venue. So that's not going to work for everyone, but there are potentially opportunities. So that's really the thought about minimizing the challenge. I'm going to pass to Harry to talk about lowering the employment barriers.
Thanks, James. So yeah, lowering the employment barriers. So we've just put a few bullet points here of some hints and tips from us that we think would really help with that. The first one being ditching application forms and CVs and handing in CVs. Now, I know that sounds very harsh, but what do we mean by that? I guess, you know, we in our hospitality, our beloved hospitality industry, we don't necessarily always look for experience when we're looking to recruit staff. A lot of the time we're looking for people with the right attitude and the right personality. So if that's the case, then why ask for a CV? You know, why slow that process down and have someone have to create a CV or update a CV with all the different bars and restaurants and so on that they've worked in, when actually it could just be a different process. And some of the interesting approaches that people have done recently are things like creating videos with a kind of put your hands up if you're looking for a job approach. We've seen a few recently. The guys at Supersonic, Mark McCulloch, they did one for Buzzworks. There's a link to it there, probably one that you should check out, actually. Have a look at that on TikTok. It's a video around their recruitment process. And they've been doing things like hiring influencers and really trying to make the content interesting and engaging, and trying to make the processes as simple as possible for people applying for that. And then the next point on the list, James, if you could just go back, is responding quicker and reducing the process. So again, on that point, if we're looking to people are applying for jobs, then essentially what we want to do is not have the application sitting there for too long. We all know that it's a very difficult market out there right now to find staff. So if there are good candidates, then we want to be jumping on that straight away. So first tip absolutely is get on top of your applications and reach out to those people and arrange to have a chat with them. And then also the process itself, get them in for an interview, do that maybe via Teams or Zoom or some kind of conference call, and really ask the right questions, right? So minimize the amount of time that you're spending on that process and really get the information that you need from the candidate before you make those decisions. Another thing that I thought was quite interesting that a client that we've been working with a lot recently did is open day recruitment days. So almost inviting a load of people to come to one big session. The client that we were working with actually hired a hotel, a really nice conference room in a hotel with a huge wraparound screen, and they used it as almost a sort of induction into the business as well. So there was a video created around the business and really got people excited and engaged in working for them. And essentially they ran it almost like an X Factor type thing. So it was almost like throughout the day, they eliminated certain things and eventually came down to kind of last people standing. And then that they were able to make decisions on picking the right people from there. The next point is giving people an experience, and what we mean by that is essentially rewarding people for attending that recruitment process. So it may be that you come in for an interview, and after the interview you're given a voucher, and then you get to go into one of the sites or into one of the units to have a drink or a coffee or some food. And really that's, there's a lot of things for that. It's a bit of reward and recognition to say thank you very much for attending and taking the interest in working for our business, but also it lets that person experience the brand, which then helps and get a better understanding of it. And then the next one for us is encouraging and rewarding referrals. So, a bit of a no-brainer really, and it kind of does what it says on the tin there, is putting incentives in place. So things like vouchers for dining experiences. And this is for team members that work within your team that are then recommending friends or people that they know who may be a good candidate to work with you, right? So putting incentives in place like dining vouchers, like experience activities, gift vouchers. I think the days are gone where we give booze away. I think that's a bit of an old school thing and not very mindful these days either. I remember the days when I used to work in bars and any incentive was rewarded with a bottle of Smirnoff. And I think, those days are past now. It's not the right way to go. I think it's about, again, encouraging people to do things outside of work, visit other places, understand the industry more, that kind of thing. So definitely encourage referrals and reward referrals as well. And then the final point on the list is engaging between hiring and starting, right? So appreciate there's not a huge amount that you can do here, but it may be just a case of feeding people content and giving people some content to, again, get them engaged, get them excited about their new role. An example that we had recently was with Virgin Trains. The old Virgin Trains. What they used to do was essentially when someone came on board, they would send them emails sort of 10 days on the run up to their opening to their first day. And within those emails, there would just be some engaging stuff that would keep them going. So those kind of ideas, any kind of pre-learning induction things that you can send over for the business as well, essentially so people are familiar with the business when they walk in the door and they're not just coming on their first day out their nappies. And that's me. Back over to you, James.
Thank you. I think as well with that whole engaging between hiring and start date, the thing that strikes me is that I've been in the position, and I know lots of others that have been in a position where if that period, particularly with someone that might be a leadership position or a site leadership position where might be a month, 6 weeks, 2 months even between that period, and almost you hear nothing, that's prime period for somebody else to come in and scoop that person up with an alternative offer, right? And I think that's where the regular touch points with new members of the team, just dropping them information and really getting them to understand why your business is so great from that outset, and continually connecting with them feels like it's a no-brainer really, to make sure that you don't lose the potential during that period.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to pick up number 3, but before I do, we've had a question from Sarah, who I'm just adding onto the screen here. So, do you have any suggestions for other arrangements to reduce admin time for managers? We have 4 sites, and the GM at each spends their entire Monday doing admin and reporting for the week, which this isn't an abnormal situation. I would say it's a relatively similar situation to what I've seen a lot. And if I think about the experience of when I've been an executive in businesses and we've spent time trying to reduce this, it really takes a whole of company approach. So the first thing is to go back to people who require that work to be done and to look at what is actually being done firstly. So it requires an audit. And that audit really requires people to say, to think about the value that thing is particularly adding, that particular task. Examples that we've done that reduce this elsewhere are, the first one is stock taking. Often becomes a big thing. People do that weekly or monthly. I've moved within most of the businesses I've been involved with to spot checks rather than full stock takes. So you only do a full stock take either once a month or even less regularly, and instead you do spot checks. So it's to try and ensure that there's consistency. So your person at head office may well say, actually, I'm going to pick 5 items on the bar and 5 items of food today, and I'm going to email them and I'm going to ask them to send back. And suddenly that means that you're reducing a 2-hour task down to 10 minutes. So that's one example. Another one that you often find is that finance departments want everything all the time. And actually, when you work through it, you often find that most of the information that your team are doing is actually duplicated at another point in the business. So I would then look for where you've got data duplication going on and you've got task duplication, and trying to remove that duplication of tasks. The other big thing I would do is also culturally change the mindset that Mondays isn't admin day anymore. And I think that that's a significant change in its own right. If I think I've got all day to do it, I will spend all day doing it. And I think if it's something that I can do within 2 hours, and I'm told that I'm really expected to do it in 2 hours, then people will start to deliver it quicker and become more efficient. And I would also pass it back to your GMs to say, what is it that's taking you the longest time? And what is it, if we were to help reduce it, would improve that? Frankly, above and beyond that, which I've already said, connected technology, better analytics tools, and systems that automate processes, frankly, will be the biggest saving you've got. But I think those other ones will help.
Yeah. And I think finally, the only thing that I would add to that is empowering your teams, right? So delegating certain tasks to other people. And it's not, it helps the managers, it gives the managers a little bit of time back, but also it helps people's development as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to also answer, Sebastian's just come on and saying feeding employees with too much information might be doing the opposite effect as who wants to work on their free time. I think that it's not necessarily about working on the free time. If you took the Virgin Trains example, which Harry mentioned, and the reason this came up in conversation recently is that our Chief Learning Officer, James McCluskey, has done this recently with somebody and talked about that example he'd had. What we actually found, to be fair, was that it was very infographic led. It was quite inspiring. It was less about learn this, more about actually this is interesting. And I think what we do find extensively is that team members are engaged and do want to use applications and engage with their colleagues via apps and so on. And I'm not sure that it is necessarily a in-work, out-of-work thing. I think it's an engaged or not as engaged thing, frankly.
Yeah.
But I'm aware of the time, and I'm going to move on to the next section, which is perhaps the one that's you were most looking to for coming here, and it's about making yourself a better employer. So what do we mean by that? Well, I think firstly we really need to say think differently. And I think there is a mindset often in hospitality, particularly within site managers and mid managers, whereas because they might have been in the sector a long time, it might be worthwhile to say that they could come, and we see this, could come with a mindset of, I had to put in the hard graft, I had to put in all the hours, and therefore the people around me should have to do that now, because that's almost about earning your stripes. And I think what you need to say is really change that mindset and say, well, that's just not the reality we live in right now. That might have been the way that you grew up through the industry, but that's not our industry now. It's not society now, and it's almost certainly not what our teams expect right now. So trying to make sure that we pull that out and we think differently from the beginning, and we respect work-life balance. We think about the mental health and mental wellness and so on. I think that's the first point here. The second one is, I think we all know this, but concentrating on purpose and values. How many businesses have you worked in and worked with that it's all about the financial gain? It's all about the financial reports on a Monday morning. It's all about, and I think it's about shifting the mindset to becoming much more focused on purpose and values. If you've not got a real sense of purpose and values in your organization, it's about going through a process to get there, and then also rewarding and recognizing people for those values and purpose. It's not just about the 4 words on the back corridor wall. It's about how people are living and breathing there. The next one's about a focus on great onboarding, and Harry's going to pick up on that in a couple of minutes' time. And then the last one I think we've recognized is that there is a great way of engaging people and streamlining processes through the use of technology. And it does mean that ultimately people are consistently given upskilling, training, and also career development. And it's very, very clear that that's what's going to happen. And there's a process around that, which is often the challenge, is that within a day-to-day operating the site, between the coffee machine breaking and a delivery being missing and all those other things, you can absolutely see that it's not the priority. So it's about putting it back on the priority list. So I'm going to move on to talking about a new generation. I'm going to run through this very quickly, but ultimately our new generation of employees are also influenced by the pandemic, and some of what we saw as being the challenges of dealing with the youngest team members have actually now spread throughout much of the workforce. So there's a changing expectation. People care more about work-life balance. That's probably not a surprise. They're concerned about uncertainty. I mean, of course, the reality for many people is that they may have gone and worked, and I think the one we always hear about in an Amazon warehouse. I'm not sure why it's an Amazon warehouse, but we hear about this. And they ultimately do want to get back to hospitality because they love the buzz, they love the camaraderie, all of the fun that we have in our sector. But it's that uncertainty around closures and all the rest of it, which hopefully we're over the bump of, but let's wait to see. The next one's about actually thinking about a digital native generation. We're talking about people who have grown up on tablets and on devices, who talk to each other through games on a headset. They don't speak to each other over the table in a pub necessarily. And there is a point which is, and I hear this actually from my own cousins who are the age at 17, 18, where they're just don't have the confidence to speak and connect with people in the real world. And I think we really need to embrace that and think about it as a sector. Therefore, they need more reassurance. They often haven't been allowed to fail. I know that you can joke, but there's been a definite shift in education towards everyone's a winner. At sports day, I don't know if you have first, second, third anymore, but everyone gets a little medal. But I joke, but we all know that that's the reality of the way that education is run for the last decade or so. And I think that means that we have to think about people and how we deal with them slightly differently. And also they believe a lot in equity and justice. And I think as an organization, you need to really consider just how you're managing people and how that flows through to your team. An example of an organization that does this really well is Honest Burger. We don't work with them, but they are an organization that shares a lot. I found these online because the guys on their team on LinkedIn share it publicly, and I think that that's an organization to look at who do this fantastically well. So do have a look at Honest Burger. It's an example of their contract, and then their how they act, fundamentally their values, but in a much more dynamic way. So I'm going to pass back to Harry for the final 5 or 10 minutes, and we are running over slightly, but I think we're trying to answer all your questions, and we'll carry on doing so.
Yeah, thanks, James. Okay, and again, I'll keep it very brief, but really we want to just talk about the difference between onboarding versus induction. Like, what are the actual differences of it? First of all, let's look at induction. I mean, for me, induction is really part of onboarding, right? So induction is where you get to know where you work, you get to understand the business, the core values, the different brands there may be within that business, offers, basic policies, procedures, knowing who to go to, that type of thing. So that for me is induction, and that could be your first day. It could be something that's done digitally. It could be there's lots of different ways of doing that. But I would say an induction is part of onboarding, and then onboarding itself is very much a pathway to become a fully fledged, knowledgeable, skilled team member. And points on here, just to shout out that I think it's in terms of onboarding, it's actually a two-way process. So many people will have coffee chats, temperature checks built into that onboarding process, so that you can actually get some feedback from the team member, which will then help you shape and improve your onboarding process and make it more engaging. And then it lasts longer. And it's about the impersonal processes as well, building trust, confidence, teamwork, that kind of thing. Pretty heavy hitting stat here from Whitbread: 30% of people leave within the first 30 days. So we just thought we'd pop that in there because it is a very heavy stat, but I'm sure you won't be surprised to read that. And then talking about the first 90 days. So I won't read out every single one. James, maybe we can share this on LinkedIn afterwards. But within this slide here, we talk about the 6 C's. So these are the things that, within the first 90 days, if we can cover this, then in our view, it'd be a very positive onboarding experience. So compliance, of course, this is the sort of HR side of things, your food safeties, health and safeties, that kind of thing, legal and policy related issues. Clarification, so understanding your new role, and who to go to, and so on and so on. Culture, huge. I mean, we can't talk about that enough, is creating the right culture within the business in terms of values. Connection, new hires, personal relationships, confidence. So for me, probably the biggest thing, we all know that when you bring on a new member of staff into the business, for me, when that person gets confident is when that person really comes to life. So we want to try and get people as comfortable and as confident as possible, as quickly as possible. And then checkbacks. So again, not just writing out these excellent plans and letting people follow them, but actually checking back on it to ensure that things are being completed and ensure that people are comfortable in the process.
Great. I think that I was going to just use a very short example. And Gleneagles are a current customer of MapOwl Group. I'm not referencing this, and I know they do some fantastic work at this exact point, but I just wanted to reference something that I was involved with actually a long time ago, 15 years ago or so. But the reason for this is that I was recently involved in the Springboard Awards judging, and we were looking at onboarding. And I do feel like actually so many of the applications we viewed still hadn't picked up many of the basic things that we'd achieved at that time. And I think it's a great example that I can talk to. But at Gleneagles, actually, the induction process has always been fantastic. I was very lucky that it was one of my first proper jobs out of working in my family business, and it was very thorough. But there were small touch points that were an issue. And I think that the touch points at the time that we really recognized were that, first of all, often people stayed at the hotel, stayed within staff accommodation. And actually your first point of contact was security upon arriving for your staff accommodation. And I think that the challenge we found with that was that, you know, people are walking in the front door and they're getting a 5-star experience. I'm arriving as an employee and I walk into the trades entrance and I have to go to security. Like, let's change that up a bit. And that's what we did back in the day. The second point was very similar. So the first day when you arrived on your actual, not the day you would arrive with all of your belongings, but your first day of work, is that you would often be in a small meeting room that was in the staff accommodation. Your first interaction again would be to go and get a pass from security, and it all felt quite functional rather than experiential. And I think the view that we looked at there again was saying, wouldn't it be great on your first morning you got an experience of the 5-star environment you're going to be working in, rather than one of being an employee that has to come to the trades entrance. And actually, there was some great work done by Martin McPhail, who I know is one of our customers in another guys now. And he really looked at changing the structure and actually having people getting their breakfast in the main hotel restaurant on their first morning, so that almost it was setting the tone from the beginning. I mean, just small changes in this way and giving people an experience rather than straight in at the deep end or straight into a relatively functional situation feels like the things that people will walk away and be really positive about, and be the things that people spread and talk about. Because ultimately that's what we want, right? Is talkability as an employee and within your employer experience. When we think about great onboarding, to round this up, what do we mean? So there's the pre-onboarding piece. There's the bit we've already talked about there, which is about after being hired to being welcomed officially. What's that space looking like? And I think to just mention that Rich Dawson here was obviously involved in the Virgin Trains project that we mentioned earlier, and Rich Dawson gave some stats here. He said the VT emails, Virgin Train emails, were open 99% by 99% of new starters and revisited on average 15 times. I mean, I remember wanting to go and start work at Gleneagles. I was young, as most of our teams are, and I was enthused and inspired to want to work at this venue. I would spend hours at a time on their website, almost wanting to envelop myself in this brand. And I think people do want to do that. And I think that ultimately, I get that there's a balance to be made about expecting people to do things, and I'm not expecting modules to be completed without pay and so on, but inspirational information. But that said, we also know that there are many of our customers that get all of the compliance work done before someone arrives and their induction module online. But the way they do that is that in the first pay packet, people will get paid for that time that it takes to complete the training. So I do think there are ways around that. Second one is thinking really extensively about the first day. What is it that's going to deliver a brilliant experience from the moment they walk in? And how do you make that more less functional and more experiential? Next one about senior level welcome. Might sound really obvious, but I think that it's often something that we overlook. Just having someone pop by, or even if it's a video chat with the MD once or twice a month for new starters, can add a lot of value, because people feel like they're meeting the most senior or a senior person, and that those people have taken time out to welcome them personally to the business. We also know that personal contact and one-to-ones is really vital. So I think that actually, in response to the Whitbread stat, which is from another webinar that we delivered, that you should go and look for on our website if you're interested in this, they realized that it was the one-to-ones that made the big difference in the first 30 days of people staying than not staying. I think making sure that managers and site managers take the time to have those coffee chats within that first month is really vital. The mentoring or buddy piece probably doesn't come as a massive shock, but it is absolutely the way to go. And I think making sure that people have got someone they know who to go to, that they can ask things that they wouldn't necessarily ask their manager. Let's make sure that they're very clear from the beginning that there is a career path here and what that tangible career path looks like. We've recently launched a new tool which is about career paths as part of the Flow tool, which you should talk to your customer success manager about, and it will be rolled out, if not already done so, within the next few weeks to various people. think that the idea of a welcome gift, something small that makes people feel appreciated, and the whole piece about uniforms. I mean, how many times have you started a job? I know I have, where say, okay, that's great. Day one, go to the back cupboard, rustle around somewhere on the floor. I think you'll find an apron, and I think somewhere hanging up there might be and it may well be dirty. It might, like, making sure that even if we're reusing uniform, that it's really nicely packaged and it's nicely presented and that it's given to you. It's about you. It's not about going and finding something in the back cupboard. And I think the last one, we've talked about it, but give them an experience of your business. Help them understand what hospitality actually means and how you deliver great hospitality.
Yeah.
And I think the real last piece is, look, we are a technology business, but ultimately we're a hospitality business. Most of our team come from a hospitality background. We work extensively with our customers at MapAl Group and to help them overcome these challenges. And the reason that we're passionate about this is that technology can relieve the pressure. It can help with engagement and communication. The visibility and preferences of scheduling is something we've been building into our workforce solution, and it's been really well received by employees, because it means that they can ultimately start to adapt their working shifts to what they need rather than just the employer, and there's a good outcome. There's the piece about, from the day one, do you understand what's expected of you? Is there really easy to understand checklists and operating standards? And I think within our compliance tool, we've nailed this down into a place which means that even if a team member takes a break or you're left on your own to open on day 3 or 4, there's really easy technology solutions to help you feel more comfortable in your job. And you can put little training information within there and so on. So it's almost about on the job, as needed training rather than just the pre-training that would have been the case before. Rewards and recognition we've talked about a lot, and the upskilling and careers and helping people to understand the pattern for the future. But you know what? At the end of the day, all of this has to reflect your business brand and culture. I think that's to go back to Harry's point on there's no magic wand. There isn't a list of 10 things you can do and you're going to be a better employer. We know this, right? It's an iterative process. It's a process that it means that you ultimately have to get it right for your team members. That can be very different from if you're bigger venues like hotels that have got hundreds of staff and a senior management on site, to being multi-sites, and I think that you need to find your way through it. Ultimately, though, our team are really well experienced at being able to do this and support people. And if you're working with us and you feel like this is still an issue for you, like, it might be worthwhile having a review and just thinking about what the challenges are and how we can help you take the next step in delivering better. We've got incredible leaders internally. We've got James McCluckey and his team. I mean, Chloe's been posting here, and I know that Bethany's here. These people have got extensive experience in hospitality. Harry, Ellie, Hannah, like our business development team, equally have got extremely broad experiences within the sector, as do our customer success team. Like, we're here to help, and we really do want to help. If anyone's got any other comments, feedback, questions, feel free to drop them in. I'm aware we've gone over, but people are seeming to hang around, so it feels like hopefully we're adding some value to your day.
Yeah, feel free to share any positive onboarding tips as well that we can share with anybody else. And also, we've recently done a white paper on onboarding, and we'll be sure to share that with everybody within here in the chat as well.
I think on that note, we're not getting a lot more comments, and that's great. We must have nailed it, Harry. So well done. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you all for coming.
Enjoy the rest of your day and week, and let's hope that we can get out of the woods with this soon, and that we start getting floods of people coming back to our sector, because frankly, why wouldn't they? There is no better sector to work with in the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.